Marcus Hale stood silently at the far end of the glass boardroom at 7 a.m., his fingers tightening around a leather folder as his wife lifted a glass of red wine and laughed loudly in front of the executives who were about to change her life. The 41-year-old Marcus Hale had learned long ago how to disappear in plain sight. When you grow up black in rooms built by power, you learn when to speak and when silence keeps you alive. That skill had made him wealthy. It had also made him invisible. Marcus stood near the window of the executive boardroom overlooking the city skyline. A city he had helped build without ever putting his face on billboards. The table stretched long and polished, surrounded by men in tailored suits and one woman standing proudly at the head. Claire Hale. His wife. She wore a white designer dress, sharp, confident, radiant. Today was her day. A $400 million acquisition deal. The kind that made careers legendary. She had spent weeks rehearsing this moment. Practicing her speech. Perfecting her confidence. Marcus watched her with a mixture of pride and quiet distance. None of the executives in the room knew who he really was. To them he was just Claire's husband. A +1. An accessory. Marcus had insisted on attending quietly. No introductions. No titles. Claire agreed easily. She was used to leading now. Years ago things were different. Back when Marcus worked late nights building systems, writing code, investing carefully. Back when Claire complained that he was always tired, always distracted. She wanted visibility. Status. Applause. Marcus wanted ownership. As his wealth grew silently, her impatience grew louder. By the time Claire landed the negotiation with Ardent Capital, she barely consulted Marcus anymore. She spoke of him affectionately in public. Dismissively in private. The boardroom buzzed with anticipation. Assistants moved quickly. Documents were placed. Pens aligned. The lead executive from Ardent Capital smiled. "We are pleased to finalize this partnership." Claire nodded proudly. "As am I." She lifted her glass of wine. A symbolic toast before signatures. "To vision," she said. "To bold leadership." Applause followed. Marcus shifted his weight slightly. The leather folder under his arm contained documents no one had asked to see. Yet. Claire turned her head and noticed him standing quietly. Her smile changed. "Why are you standing there like staff?" she said, laughing. "Come closer." The room chuckled politely. Marcus took a step forward. She rolled her eyes playfully. "Relax, everyone. He is just my husband." More laughter. Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Not pain. Recognition. Claire raised her glass again. "This deal is about proving that I belong at this table." She looked directly at Marcus. "Some people never understand what it takes to win." Then she stepped closer. Close enough that only he could hear. "You should learn from this." She tilted the glass. Red wine spilled down his shirt. Slow. Deliberate. Gasps filled the room. Executives froze. Someone laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a joke. Marcus looked down at the spreading stain. Then back up at her. Claire smiled. "Oops." She waved dismissively. "Someone get him a napkin." An assistant rushed forward. Marcus raised a hand gently. "It's fine." The room went quiet. Claire shrugged. "See. Always so calm. That is why he never gets anywhere." That line landed harder than the wine. Marcus took a slow breath. Then walked to the table. Placed the leather folder down calmly. The lead executive cleared his throat. "Shall we proceed?" Marcus spoke. "Actually. Before you do." The room turned. Claire frowned. "Marcus, stop. This is not the time." Marcus met her eyes. It is exactly the time. He opened the folder. Inside were ownership documents, shareholding records, corporate seals. The Ardent Capital executive leaned forward confused. Marcus spoke evenly. I believe you should know who you are signing with. Claire laughed nervously. What is this? Marcus turned to the executives. My name is Marcus Hale, founder and majority owner of Ardent Capital. Silence exploded. The executive's face drained of color. The room stood still. Claire's smile collapsed. What did you just say? Marcus continued calmly. Every dollar of this $400 million deal comes from my company. He looked at the wine dripping from his shirt. So technically, you just poured wine on the man funding your success. No one breathed. Claire stepped back, shaking. This is not funny. Marcus closed the folder. I have never found humiliation funny. The Ardent Capital executive stood abruptly. Sir. We had no idea. Marcus nodded. That was intentional. He turned to Claire. You wanted to prove you belonged at this table. She could not speak. The room that once applauded her now stared at Marcus. And for the first time, they saw him. The silence in the boardroom stretched until it became unbearable. No one knew where to look. Eyes bounced between Marcus and Claire. Between the wine-soaked shirt and the documents that had just rewritten reality. The lead executive from Ardent Capital finally found his voice. Mr. Hale. If we had known. Marcus lifted his hand calmly. You were not supposed to know. He turned slightly, looking around the table at the men who minutes earlier laughed politely. Men who now sat stiff back, straight, hands folded like students caught cheating. Claire's breath came shallow. Her face pale. This is some kind of misunderstanding, she said quickly. You never told me. Marcus nodded slowly. That is true. She latched onto that. You hid this from me. Marcus looked at her the same way he looked at balance sheets. Without emotion. Without softness. I hid my wealth, he said. Not my character. The room felt colder. An executive cleared his throat. Perhaps we should pause the signing. Marcus nodded. Yes. We should. Claire stepped forward, panic cracking through her composure. Marcus, please. Not here. He met her eyes. You chose here. The assistant who had brought napkins earlier now stood frozen. The napkin still useless in her hands. Marcus unbuttoned his jacket slowly. Removed it. Folded it neatly. Placed it on the chair beside him. The red stain remained visible. Unhidden. Let us be clear, Marcus said. This meeting was never about a deal. The executives exchanged uneasy looks. This meeting is about respect. He turned to the Ardent Capital lead. You vetted Claire Hale as a visionary leader. Confident. Bold. Strategic. The man nodded carefully. Yes, sir. Marcus continued. Did you vet how she treats people when she believes they have no power? The question landed like a weight. No one answered. Marcus turned back to Claire. You believed success meant standing above others. Looking down. Humiliating what you no longer needed. Claire shook her head. That is not fair. Marcus tilted his head. You poured wine on me. Her lips parted. Closed. Opened again. I was joking, she whispered. Marcus nodded. Jokes reveal truth when power is involved. The ardent executive stood. Mr. Hale. We deeply apologize. This behavior does not reflect our values. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Does it not? The man swallowed. Marcus walked slowly around the table. Every step deliberate. Every voice silent. He stopped behind one executive who had laughed earlier. "When you laughed just now," Marcus said quietly. "What did you think was funny?" The man stammered. "I thought it was a harmless moment." Marcus nodded. "Harmless to whom?" The man said nothing. Marcus returned to the head of the table. "Here is what will happen next." Everyone leaned forward. "This deal will not be signed today." Claire gasped. Marcus continued. "Not because 400 million is insignificant, but because character is non-negotiable." Claire stepped forward, desperation clear. "Marcus. This deal is everything." Marcus looked at her. "Everything to whom?" She froze. "To you," he said. "Because you believed success would finally separate you from me." That sentence cut deeper than anger. Marcus turned back to the executives. "Ardent Capital will revisit this partnership only after a full internal review of leadership conduct." The lead executive nodded quickly. "Of course." Marcus added. "And until that review is complete, all funding is suspended." A murmur rippled through the room. Claire's knees weakened. She grabbed the edge of the table. "You are destroying me," she whispered. Marcus responded calmly. "No. I am stepping out of the way of who you have already become." He looked around the room one last time. "You invited me into this room thinking I was small. Thinking I was decoration. Thinking silence meant weakness." He tapped the folder once. "Silence is how ownership moves." Marcus picked up his folded jacket. Placed it over his arm. "This meeting is adjourned." He turned and walked toward the door. Behind him the room erupted into hushed chaos. Claire called after him. "Marcus, wait." He stopped but did not turn. "I built my life around becoming someone worthy of this room," she cried. Marcus spoke without facing her. "I built mine so I would never need permission to enter." The doors closed behind him. Outside the boardroom, executives began arguing quietly. Legal teams whispered. Phones rang. Inside, Claire remained standing alone. The wine glass still in her hand. Red droplets staining the white tablecloth. For the first time she understood something she never questioned. She had married a man she never bothered to know. News moved faster than the elevator that carried Marcus down from the boardroom. By the time he reached the lobby, phones were already buzzing. Assistants whispered. Security straightened. The city loved stories like this. Especially the kind where power revealed itself without shouting. Marcus stepped into his car and leaned back. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply closed his eyes. For years he had prepared for this moment without knowing it. Not the humiliation, but the clarity. At the Ardent Capital headquarters, chaos unfolded. Executives argued. Legal teams demanded explanations. PR departments scrambled to contain a narrative already out of their control. Who is Marcus Hale? How did we not know? Why was he never disclosed? The answer was simple. Marcus never needed to be seen. Back in the boardroom, Claire sat alone long after everyone left. The table was cleared. The glasses removed. Only the red stain remained like a scar. Her phone vibrated endlessly. Texts from partners. From her parents. From colleagues. What happened? Is it true? Did you know? She did not respond. For the first time in her life, silence felt dangerous. That evening she went home to the penthouse Marcus bought years ago under a holding company she never questioned. She sat on the couch staring at the door. When Marcus finally arrived, she stood immediately. You embarrassed me, she said, her voice breaking. Marcus removed his shoes calmly. I was embarrassed long before today. She stepped closer. You let me believe you were less. Marcus looked at her. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. That silence returned. You could have told me, she whispered. Marcus nodded. Yes. I could have. She waited. But I wanted to see who you became when you thought I had nothing to offer. Tears streamed down her face. I was under pressure. Everyone expected me to be powerful. Marcus replied softly. Power that needs an audience is fragile. She sank into the chair. What happens now? Marcus walked to the window. The city lights spread below them. Now, he said. You face the consequences of who you chose to be. The next morning headlines exploded. CEO pours wine on husband in boardroom. Shock as husband revealed as owner of funding company. Deal suspended over leadership conduct. Claire's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Investors pulled back. Board members questioned her role. An internal ethics review launched. Her parents called repeatedly. Angry. Panicked. You married him and never knew, she yelled. Claire whispered. I never asked. At Ardent Capital, Marcus convened a closed meeting. This time he sat at the head of the table openly. No disguise. No distance. Executives sat rigid. We failed you, one said. Marcus corrected calmly. You failed yourselves. He outlined new terms. Zero tolerance for misconduct. Leadership reviews. Mandatory accountability. And Claire Hale. Her position would be reviewed by an independent board. One executive hesitated. She is talented. Marcus nodded. So are many people who lack integrity. Back home, Claire packed a bag slowly. Each item felt heavier than it should. She approached Marcus one last time. I loved you in my own way, she said. Marcus met her eyes. Love that requires superiority is not love. She nodded, defeated. As she left the penthouse, she realized something devastating. She had mistaken his patience for weakness. His quiet for insignificance. And the world had just corrected her. Days turned into weeks. Claire resigned before the board could remove her. Publicly citing personal reasons. But everyone knew. Marcus watched from a distance. Not with satisfaction. With acceptance. One afternoon he received a message from an old friend. You okay? Marcus replied. I am finally aligned. At a small private dinner weeks later, Marcus raised a glass among trusted partners. To clarity, he said. They nodded. Because money could build rooms. But truth decided who deserved to stay in them. The city moved on the way it always did. Fast. Selective. Hungry for the next spectacle. But for Marcus Hale, nothing rushed anymore. Life had slowed into something deliberate. Something honest. He no longer hid behind glass walls or quiet presence. He stepped fully into rooms that once overlooked him. Not to dominate. But to define standards. Ardent Capital released its final statement weeks later. The deal with Claire Hale's firm was officially terminated. The ethics review cited conduct unbecoming of leadership. Failure of judgment. Abuse of power. The $400 million never moved. Claire watched the announcement from a small rented apartment far from the skyline she once chased. The silence there was different. Not peaceful. Exposing. Her phone no longer rang. Invitations stopped. Her name became something people avoided mentioning. Not because she was famous. But because she was a reminder. She replayed the boardroom moment endlessly. The wine. The laughter. The way she believed power meant permission. Now she understood what Marcus meant. Silence is how ownership moves. Marcus stood on the terrace of his office one evening watching the sun sink behind the city. Amelia, his chief legal officer, joined him. Everything is settled, she said. No further claims. No appeals. Marcus nodded. Good. She hesitated. You could have destroyed her completely. Marcus looked out over the city. Destruction is loud. Correction lasts. Weeks later Marcus hosted a private leadership summit. Executives. Founders. Investors. No press. No cameras. He opened with a simple statement. Titles do not grant character. Money does not replace humility. And power reveals who you already are. The room listened. Stories circulated quietly afterward. About a billionaire who cancelled a massive deal because of disrespect. About a man who let truth speak instead of anger. Marcus never corrected the stories. He did not need to. One evening a letter arrived. Handwritten. Marcus. I am not writing to ask for anything. I am writing because I finally see myself clearly. And I do not like what I see. I confused ambition with cruelty. And confidence with entitlement. You were never invisible. I was. Claire. Marcus read it once. Folded it. Placed it in a drawer. Not forgiveness. Not resentment. Closure. Months later Ardent Capital announced a new initiative. Funding women founders. Minority-led companies. Ethics-driven leadership. Marcus stood at the podium briefly. This is not charity, he said. This is correction. Applause followed. Not thunderous. Sincere. That night Marcus returned home alone. Poured himself a glass of water. Stood by the window. He thought about the boy he once was. The man people underestimated. The husband who stayed quiet too long. And he smiled. Not because he won. But because he no longer needed to prove anything. Across the city Claire walked past a restaurant where laughter spilled onto the street. She paused. Then kept walking. Both had learned something. But only one had learned it in time. The boardroom incident became a case study. Taught in business schools. Discussed in leadership seminars. Not as a scandal. But as a lesson. Never confuse access with authority. Never mistake silence for weakness. And never pour wine on a man without knowing who owns the table. Marcus Hale never raised his voice. Never demanded apology. Never sought revenge. He simply stood in truth. And let the world adjust. And it did.